Welcome to The Forgetting Curve, a compilation of childhood memories. In this episode, we're going to be exploring friendship. Childhood friends have a unique bond. When we're young, we don't yet know who we're going to grow up to be. But when we do find someone that we can call our friend, growing up and learning alongside that person makes the experience all the more rewarding. Our first story is from a young girl who found that pretending to be someone you're not can put you in danger of losing that friendship.
Very early on in primary school, I'm pretty sure it was around prep, I used to have this technique for making friends. I guess in kindergarten, you know how occasionally someone would bring like a toy to kindergarten and be like, look at my toy, now we're friends, because we're going to interact with this toy together. But for some reason, when I got to primary school, I wanted to be, and I remember thinking in my head, I really want to be interesting. And I want to have these relationships with people where I'm interesting and we're like interested in each other. I don't know, in my mind, growing up with, my mum was quite a world traveller throughout her youth, and I'd always grown up with these stories of her going on these amazing adventures and doing all these amazing things. So maybe I was thinking, oh, I don't have any amazing adventures to tell someone. So what I decided when I was in prep was that in order to make friends with people, and I think this only happened like 2 or 3 times, but still, I would pretend that English wasn't my first language and that I either spoke French or Indonesian. But the thing is, because I didn't know Indonesian was a language, but I just knew that people went to Bali, I called it Balish, like, because that's a language that people speak in Bali. So there are 2 main kind of things that I remember to do with this. The first one being myself and a friend. What can I call her? I'll call her Lisa. Myself and Lisa were playing at playtime, recess, whatever, during school. And I remember saying something to her like, you know, I can speak French. And she would say, oh, teach me something in French. And then I can't remember it exactly, but I would have said something like, well, what do you want to say in French? Like, give me a sentence and I'll translate it for you. Obviously didn't know the word for translate then, but she said something like, I want to say I miss my mum in French. And what I did was, obviously I couldn't speak French, so I translated it to like, merci morceau le meur, or something like that. And in my head, that was French for I miss my mum. And so Lisa was running around the playground going, merci morceau le meur, merci madame in this fake French language. And a teacher came up and was like, what are you yelling? What are you yelling about? And Lisa says to the teacher, oh, Anna's teaching me French, and this means I miss my mum. Merci madame. And then the teacher goes, no, it doesn't. That's not French. And I was like, yes, it is. It's French. I know how to speak French. And she's like, that's not French. French, in order to say that, it would be like, tu me manques le mama, or proper French. And so this girl, Lisa, turned to me and was like, can you not speak French? And I had to have that moment where it was like, do I continue this lie, which essentially it was a big fat lie, or do I admit that I was wrong? And what I said to her was, oh, well, maybe we just speak a different type of French. But then I think after a while, I really did say to her, well, listen, Lisa, I can't speak French. And I'm sorry that I lied to you, but I can speak Balish. And then she's like, what's Balish? And I'm like, oh, they speak it in Bali. I can also speak that. And I have no idea why this girl believed me, because I wouldn't have believed me. But then again, I was caught out by a teacher because in library class, someone had brought some pictures from Indonesia that were like those traditional Indonesian dances that people do with like the really beautiful headdresses and everything. And they kept using the librarian kept using this word Balinese. And in my head I was like, oh my God, I really hope Lisa doesn't pick up on this and know that Baelish is completely fake. But she did pick up on it, and she said, well, what's Balinese then? And I had to admit to her, it's all a lie. I can't speak French or Baelish or Balinese or Indonesian, and I'm really sorry that I lied to you. She seemed to take it quite well, and we were friends until we were about 16-ish, and then we kind of lost contact. So even though I did lie horribly about wanting to be more interesting and have this kind of, I wouldn't say adult relationship, but like an intellectual relationship with a young person, it kind of all turned out okay in the end. But it's a little bit embarrassing because I don't like to think of myself as a liar as a kid, but that's essentially what I was doing.
It can be hard to truthfully represent yourself as a child. When you want to impress a friend, there's often a temptation to exaggerate who you are. Endearing yourself to friends can sometimes lead you down the wrong path. Our next story is from a young boy and his friends who grew up too fast.
Well, first of all, I went to a primary school in outer suburban Melbourne, I guess, called Edithvale Primary. And I went there till about grade 2, at which point I transferred to a more inner Melbourne private school called St Leonard's. And the kind of culture contrast is quite noticeable. But I mean, I was a kid at Edithvale, young enough that I didn't even really care and I didn't notice. I started to notice a little bit when I started growing up a little bit through the primary years of St Leonard's. And I remember some of the people that I ended up knowing the longest, because I left St Leonard's by about the end of grade 7, were, I guess, some of the less affluent ones as sort of time went on. My family is sort of decidedly middle class, you know, we're not really one way or the other. But I had a few friends when I was at St Leonard's, for the sake of identity masking, I'll just use initials. I'll say D and S, and my personality type has never really been supremely outgoing or kind of all-inclusive or anything like that. I've always sort of made friends in a niche, and guys like these were sort of my people. They were a bit on the fringe or outside or whatever. And when you're children, that just means you really like cartoons and you don't like sport, you know? It's not supremely clique-generating or sort of socioeconomic as you understand it anyway, or like based on what you want to be as a professional adult or anything like that. So for children, yeah, these pockets, these groups exist in a really kind of primitive form. But as you start to grow up, I suppose at some point, particularly now in retrospect, I realize why we were friends, but then also what that meant for what kind of people we are. So D, S, and I were of a certain outer fringe outcasty group, and I liked going over to their houses and playing with the, what you call it, like the Meccano sets, the like building sets and stuff. One of my, D at one point got one of those sets where you could combine robotic stuff with Lego, which was really cool. You know, we would rent wrestling games for the N64 and play those. D had Foxtel in his house, and if you turned it to the adult channel, you couldn't see anything, but you could hear it, which was exciting for like 10-year-olds. And, you know, I probably learnt swear words from them. Like, you know, they were kind of bad influences in a way. When I started to get old enough to get into more serious trouble, I don't know, like 13 or something, I remember not being allowed to go to parties at D's house because they drank, and the mother more or less condoned it. I don't really know the full story, I guess, but my parents were not into that. I actually remember having a really teary fight with my parents about, why won't you let me go, exclaiming to them how much of a responsible person I was while sobbing about not being able to drink at 13, which sounds really dumb in retrospect. But these guys were my people because I was on the outside and I was on the fringe in some way, shape or form. I wasn't sort of like super conformist or something. Yet, as we grew up, it stopped being like, we're the guys that really like comics and cartoons. And at some point, it's like, these are the guys that are drinking already, even though they're 12 and 13. And at some point, it's like, these are the guys that are doing drugs already, even though we're 15 and 16. And I guess it's sort of funny to think in retrospect, for kids that are sort of harmless in their way their groups organize, these people kind of turned out to be maybe not the people I want to be around now. In some way, I'm still the like fringe outsider or whatever. I don't have the biggest circle of friends, but the people that, the kids that were my kids when I was growing up have all kind of turned nasty corners. I had another friend when I was a little bit older, more mid-teens. I should explain, that I left these people behind to some degree because I moved schools, and so I kind of lost contact, and I sort of found out through, keeping in touch over distance, every once in a while what happened to them. And I had another friend called C, who at some point I met during the mid-teens, and she was of this style of person as well, and I really liked that she was friendly and sort of like easy to talk to and whatever, and again, like my people, but then she was one of the first people I ever knew to be pregnant at our kind of younger age. I think she's got 2 kids now, which is not so weird in my 20s, but it was weirder when the first one came around. I can't remember exactly how old we were. I don't know what kind of person it makes me as an adult that all of the people that I hung out with in this sort of alternative culture when we were kids, which was wrestling games and robot toys and comic books, the weird kids all grew up to be drug addicts and teen mothers. And yet I'm neither of those things, thankfully, or a teen parent anyway. But those were still my people. When times were simpler and when times were more innocent, they were my people. And now, I don't know what that makes me.
That's it for this episode of The Forgetting Curve, but there's plenty more to come. If you want to keep up with the latest releases from The Forgetting Curve, then follow @ForgettingCurve on Twitter or find us on Facebook. Subscribe to our feed in iTunes or listen to our latest episode at forgettingcurvepodcast.tumblr.com. If you think you have a story to tell, then get in touch with us. We're always on the hunt for more captivating tales of childhood. Thank you for listening to The Forgetting Curve. Next time we're going to hear stories about holidays, but not fond memories of playing on the beach all day.
And I had to sleep in the back seat. And I remember thinking, now you wouldn't do it. You would never leave your children.
No.
Sleeping in the car beside it. Would have been about a 6x8 tent, I think. I remember that it was white and it had a green roof. But I had to sleep in the Austin because I was the smallest person and I could curl up on the back seat.
This podcast was produced by Ursa Minor Audio.